Okay, welcome back. Looks like we're recording again. So we've talked about grouping by gender, we've talked about grouping by interest, by body modification, all these different kinds of groups. But some of the other groups that we're most familiar with maybe might be class and caste. We don't really have much of a caste system here in the United States. For the most part, there's you're not there is some flexibility to change from one class to the next. Not that it's totally impossible to change from one class to the next, even though it is difficult. But so we don't necessarily have a caste system, but we certainly have a class system. And so I'd like to make a distinction between what a stratified society and an egalitarian society are. A stratified society are societies in which people are hierarchically divided and ranked into social strata or layers and do not share equally in basic resources that support survival, influence, and prestige. Now, this is opposite of egalitarian societies, which everyone has about equal rank, equal access to, and equal access over power and basic resources. So, as we saw when we were studying economics again, the groups such as foragers, groups such as horticulturalists, pastoralists, were much more egalitarian than what we see today. But at the same time, uh, agricultural societies, societies that used heavy agriculture, were much more stratified than today's societies are, and those stratifications were much more solid and inflexible. So, this is how we get to the idea of social class. A social class is a category of individuals in a stratified society who enjoy equal or nearly equal prestige according to the system of equation. So if somebody else is in the same social class as you, then you have near equal social prestige and within that system. So this is image from your book, just recapping ideas of social strata. So social stratification consists of hierarchical relationships among different groups, as though they were arranged in layers or strata. Stratified groups may be equal or unequal on a variety of measures, including material resources, power, human welfare, education, and symbolic attributes. This appeared late in human history with development of agriculture. So social stratification is a relatively new thing in the world if you look at all of human history. And you'll notice I like this image because it has most power and least power, and it has everybody stratified, but not just by the typical things that we tend to think about stratification in terms of wealth and access to resources, but also social class and wealth is just one part of what makes up your overall social stratification. There's also your gender, your ethnicity, your age, how attractive you are, how unattractive you are. All of these things move you up and down this social stratification, giving you more power or less power in society. So I'm not going to stop my recording, but I would like you to pause my recording in order to watch this video that I have uploaded called Class Stratification in the US. So take a minute, pause the video, and go and watch that YouTube video. It's pretty short. So hopefully you've paused and came back. I don't love the kind of overtly political message in the video, but that is a very nice visualization of a real Harvard study of class stratification in the US. And class stratification is growing and is very, very, very wide in the United States. Just as wide in the United States now as it probably ever has been in recorded history. The difference between the wealthiest individuals and some of the poor individuals in the United States is very, very big and bigger than we realize. And in fact, that study by Harvard that you just watched in that video was done in 2008, before the financial collapse and certainly before the current financial economic problems, where typically in these kinds of financial collapse, stratification gets even worse. So it's worse than the video makes it out to be, even. Okay. This is a lesson, ascribed versus achieved status, that I would typically make my students do an assignment on, but we just are too close to the end of the semester to give you another assignment. I want you all to work very diligently on your outlines for your mini ethnographies. Your rough drafts are due next week, or this week rather, excuse me, your rough drafts are due this week, and your final drafts are due next week, so I'm not going to give you even more writing. But I would like you to think somewhat deeply about this. There will be questions on the exam. So analyses of categories such as class, race, gender, age, and indigeneity within stratification systems reveals a crucial difference among them in the degree to which membership in a given category is an ascribed position based on qualifications of a person gained through birth, or an achieved position based on qualifications of a person gained through action. So these factors are generally out of control of the individual, although some flexibility exists. So an achieved status might be something that you are all trying to achieve right now. You are all trying to achieve some sort of degree, or maybe even just getting, passing my class. That would be an achieved status. Somebody who has taken and passed an anthropology class. You achieve that. That's not has anything to do with your birth, right? Whereas something like race might actually be an ascribed status where you are born into a certain race as we understand them in the United States. I have race in quotations because I'm going to problematize that category a little bit later in the class. But that's not something that you have a lot of control over. You can't work really hard to achieve a different race. Everyone else is around you is pretty much going to ascribe the same race to you no matter what you try to do. So age would be, I think, not necessarily ascribed because you can't really do anything to change your age, but you do achieve an age. If you achieve the age of 80, well, you've done something right to live to a ripe old age, right? So think about these ascribed versus achieved status, and what are some of the ascribed and achieved statuses in the United States, and are any of them flexible? How flexible are they? Why or why not? What can you think of? Which ones are ascribed and which ones are achieved? And if you've lived in other countries, if you are familiar with another culture, is as in other cultures are the same categories ascribed and achieved? Do they line up in the same way, or are there some achieved statuses in the United States that are maybe more ascribed in other nations, other cultures? Think about that a little bit. So, class in the United States. Class is generally considered to be an achieved status. Social class, defined in Chapter 1, refers to a person or group's position in society and is defined primarily in economic terms. So, in many cultures, class is a key factor in determining a person's status, their overall status, whereas in others, it is less important than, for example, birth into a certain family. So, class and status do not always match. Now, in the United States, we consider ourselves a meritocracy. In capitalist societies, the prevailing ideology is that the system of capitalism allows for upward mobility and that every individual has the option of moving up. Now, before we discuss this, I'd like you to again pause the video and watch this other very short YouTube video. It's about 3 minutes or something like that on YouTube about life privilege and race. Okay? Take a second to watch that. Pause this video. All right, hopefully you pause the video and you watch the short video, that other short video that I have linked, and it's also uploaded in D2L. Now, does the film change your idea of the United States being a meritocracy, being having everyone having the ability to move up? Does it change your idea of class being achieved status in the United States? Now, obviously, in the video, there are some people that started very, very far back in the race that moved up quite a bit. But none of them were going to win the race. It was pretty much impossible for any of them to win the race. Some of them did come close. Some of the fastest guys in the back, you notice, actually come close to catching the top. But they had to work much harder, and all these other things were working against them. So I think we do still have a system where it is possible, but it's getting much, much more hard, more difficult to move up. And so, maybe think about whether or not class is such an achieved status. Aren't you, if you're born into a certain class, isn't it much, much more likely that you will stay in a certain class? Okay. So, I don't know. Food for thought. I don't necessarily have a right or wrong answer. Okay. Now, ascribed statuses would typically be things like race, ethnicity, gender, and caste. I might change gender because gender is becoming something that's much, much more fluid in the United States. Your book describes it as an ascribed status, and it's ascribed in the sense that other people basically will choose what gender you are by their own measurements. They even if you try to dress and act like the opposite gender, other people still may misgender you or gender you in a way that makes sense to them rather than whatever gender it is you are trying to present. So gender is sometimes ascribed, but there's a lot of flexibility. Some people are lucky enough that if they want to change genders or they want other people to view them as a specific gender, they are able to perform that gender very well. Remember, we talked about gender as a performance. Men, as we saw in The Mask You Live In, that film, men must constantly perform gender, or because at any given moment they could be found out and be ascribed a different gender because they're always fighting and must always constantly act manly. So now I'm going to pause, or I'm going to stop this recording. We're going to go to the next recording. But before you start the next video, I want you to watch this documentary. It's called Race, the Power of an Illusion. It's an older documentary about the anthropological concept of race versus the biological concept of race. I want you to watch the whole thing. It's about 55 minutes, a little long, but we're gonna go into that in quite a bit of detail. And there's going to be lots of things from that documentary on our exam. So please do watch it. And while you're watching it, maybe think of some things. Think of these discussion questions. What races do we recognize in the United States? Whenever you fill out a form in the United States, how many different races are there? How many different boxes can you check, and what are they? And maybe think about too, what is the difference between race and and ethnicity? Why are those two concepts different?